Shabbat Shalom, everyone. As you can see, I'm standing at the beach, and behind me there is a yellow flag. And the reason for the yellow flag is because they're predicting a hurricane to come to Florida tomorrow. And when I saw the name of the hurricane, I couldn't believe it. It said Hurricane Isaiah, and I said, wow, Hurricane Isaiah. Then I found out it's actually pronounced Isaias. It's a Spanish name. But the reason I got so excited was because tomorrow in synagogues around the world, we're going to read the words of the prophet Isaiah. It's actually called the Shabbat Nachamu, the Shabbat of Comfort, because we read the words of chapter 40 of the book of Isaiah, where the prophet comforts the Jewish people after the loss of our temple. And the prophet says, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, comfort, O comfort my nation, says your God. Dabru Alev Yerushalayim, call out to the heart of Jerusalem, and Vikiru Eleha, and speak to its heart, and call upon it, and say, the time of your redemption has come. And indeed, this Shabbat is called the Shabbat of Comfort. Now in English, we're all familiar with the word comfortable, but the word comfort is not only not similar to comfortable, but it's the extreme opposite. I once heard someone say that the purpose of religion is to comfort those who are disturbed and disturb those who are comfortable. You see, in life we often seek comfort, and perhaps our generation is the most comfortable generation ever. We have obviously all the luxuries and comforts of modern inventions and creativity. We have air conditioning in the summer and heat in the winter. We have the most comfortable beds and pillows and sheets and couches and chairs. But yesterday was Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av was the day of discomfort. Unlike today, where we were able to eat and drink and celebrate, for the last 9 days we had to minimize our comfort. So much so that yesterday we were not allowed to eat or drink. It was a day of fasting. We could not sit on a comfortable chair or couch. We had to sit on the hard floor. We couldn't wear our comfortable leather shoes. We had to wear slippers. Why does Judaism insist that we make ourselves uncomfortable? And the answer is that sometimes comfort numbs you from the pain that you're feeling. Rather than feel the pain and then channel it into growth, we just numb it and miss the opportunity of potential growth. You know, sadly, God forbid, when someone is very ill and there's not much that can be done for the patient, the one thing people will say is, well, they're resting comfortably. That's not a state that any human being wants to be in. Life is never comfortable. There's always challenges. There's always hardships, there are always struggles, there's always tension, there's always stress. But stress doesn't mean distress. Stress means that it's a signal from our soul that we need to grow, we need to respond to that discomfort, and we need to find inner strength. It's a sign of God empowering us to become greater, to respond with greatness to whatever challenges lie in our path. You know, this coming week, we are going to celebrate what, according to the Talmud, is the most joyous day on the Jewish calendar. It's called Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av, and it comes exactly 7 days after Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av, we mourn the destruction of our temples, then we go to the Shabbat of Comfort, and then we go to the most joyous holiday. We rise up from our 7 days of mourning for the destruction of the temple, and we celebrate the greatest joyous day. And what is that day called? Tu B'Av, the day of love, the day that Jewish boys and girls would go out into the fields and choose spouses and get engaged and celebrate marriages, a day of life, of reaffirming our joy and our embracing of our lives and creating new life by creating unions of love and marriage in Jewish families. That is the Jewish response to the discomfort of Tisha B'Av. We get comfort, and comfort means that we not only make ourselves comfortable, but more importantly, that we take responsibility for our lives and we respond to the challenges of our life by empowering ourselves to act. And that's why, interestingly, the Talmud says there was something else very joyous that occurred on the day of the 15th of Av. The Talmud says it was the day of the breaking of the axes. Why? Because in the summer, when the wood was very dry, they would chop all the wood necessary for the sacrifices in the temple for the coming year. And the 15th of Av, the Talmud says, is the day when the sun heat reaches its peak, and therefore it starts to get more moist and wet, and therefore they can no longer chop wood for the temple. So they concluded the chopping of the wood for the temple, and therefore they would have a big celebration, and they would call it the celebration of the breaking of the axes. They would break their axes. And the question is, why a celebration for breaking the axes? And why break axes? Why break anything? You're going to need the axes next year again. Why break the axes? And the Maharal Prague says that there's a great symbolism in the breaking of the axes. The Talmud says in the Midrash that when God created the trees on the third day of creation, the trees cried out to God and said, God, how are we going to survive? The iron of the axe, the blade of the axe will chop us down. We don't stand a chance. And God said, if you don't provide the wood for the handle of the axe, no axe can chop you down. And therefore, the breaking of the axes symbolizes that we break those forces that have the ability to hurt us, to pain us, to destroy us. We do not allow the events of life to chop us down, but rather we stand tall and proud. And yes, we feel the pain, but we channel it into empowerment. Just like when on your dashboard of your vehicle some lights go on, it means that it's time to provide your car with some maintenance. When we feel pain, we don't numb that pain with distractions of entertainment or other forms of distraction, but rather we say, what is my soul crying out to me? It's yearning for more oxygen, spiritual oxygen, for more water, for more bread. It wants to be nourished with a connection to Hashem, with more study of Torah, with more mitzvot, with more good deeds. And that's the way we empower ourselves, and we find the greatest comfort when we transform the pain into healing and into power, into joy, and we transform our sense of resignment, of resignation to the circumstances of life into newfound energy to channel it into good. And during these difficult days, this is a very powerful message. God will comfort us from all of the troubles and misfortune that we're facing in society, both from the pandemic and from the social pandemics that are going on. But at the same time, it is up to us to act. It is us to find the true comfort, which is by harnessing our inner strength and power to respond, and not to be victims like the tree and say, what am I going to do? The axe is going to chop me down. But realize that we are sometimes fueling and feeding that victimhood by our actions that allow us to become victims to unnecessary pain. And indeed, we are the most comfortable generation that has ever lived, perhaps. We have every imaginable comfort in terms of physical comforts, but spiritually, it is up to us to not ignore the challenges, but to transform them, and from the greatest darkness comes the greatest light. I'll just conclude with a story that I heard from Rabbi Shalom Bar Lipsker, the rabbi of the Shul of Bell Harbor. He said that a woman once called him, and she was crying. She said, Rabbi, I have 3 children, and I'm facing eviction because I can't pay the rent. Can you help me? And the rabbi said, of course, I'll be happy to help you. Send me the name of your landlord and the amount, and I will send the check immediately. The woman was so touched and so grateful to the rabbi and said, Rabbi, you seem to be a very compassionate man. Can I speak to you about my problems? And the rabbi said, of course. And the woman started to cry and said, my husband, unfortunately, was sent to jail, and I'm alone with 3 children. And one of my children, my son, is a special needs child. And I have no money to support my family, and I do whatever I can, but it's not enough. And I was so desperate that I started going around, I'm embarrassed to say, and looking in the restaurant dumpsters to see if there was leftover food thrown out. And things got so bad that one day I did the unthinkable. I decided I was going to sell myself to earn some money. And so I went to a certain place, a certain bar, and I sold myself to a man. And after I finished with this man, I left his place, and I felt horrible. I felt like I was so embarrassed of myself that I couldn't live with myself. And I want you to know that I couldn't even use the money that I got to buy food because I was so ashamed of what I did. And I came home and I said, I can't live anymore. This is too difficult. And so I decided that I was going to commit suicide. And I wrote a beautiful note to my children apologizing for what I did, saying how sorry I am, but I just cannot go on. And then before I decided to kill myself, I wanted to go into my children's bedrooms and kiss them for the last time. I went to my daughter's bedroom, I kissed her goodnight as she was asleep. I said, I love you, I'm so sorry I have to do this, but I know that a nice family will adopt you and you'll have a much better life with your newfound family than with me. Then I went to kiss my second daughter. And then I went to the second bedroom to kiss my son. And I looked at my son sleeping there, and I said to myself, he's a special needs kid. He has disabilities. Who's going to want to adopt him? No one. What will happen to him? I can't leave him behind. And at that moment, I decided that I can't take my life. And she said, Rabbi, do you know the feeling of not being able to live and at the same time not being able to die? I am so torn. I cannot go on. And Rabbi Lipska said to this woman, I want you to know something. You have nothing to feel ashamed of and nothing to feel guilty about. Because in Jewish law, there's something called an onus. An onus is someone who's under such excruciating pain and distress that their mental faculties are not acting rationally. And when they act out of that sense of pain and distress, they're not held accountable for their deeds. And therefore, God does not hold you accountable for what you did. And she said, really? You mean I don't have to feel guilty? I didn't do anything wrong? And the rabbi reassured her again and again and said, ma'am, with what you're going through, with your husband in prison, no money to provide for your family, that all the hardship you're going through, you were an onus. You were a person under such distress that you're not responsible for your actions. You can go on living with a clean slate. You have nothing to worry about. The woman was so grateful and thanked the rabbi profusely. Rabbi Lipska said many years later he was giving a class on a Tuesday night in his shul in Bal Harbor, and a woman attended the class. And after the class, the woman came over to him and said, Rabbi, I came here tonight just to thank you. And Rabbi Lipska said, thank me for what? What have I done for you? And she proceeded to remind him about the phone call. And Rabbi Lipska immediately remembered that phone call and said, tell me, how have you been? And she said, my life has come back together. I took your advice. I decided I was going to live. I was going to embrace life. I found support from friends and from family. And eventually I found a job. I was able to support my family. And now my husband came out of jail, and we're all reunited again. And my husband is earning a living now, supporting the family, and my children have grown up, and Baruch Hashem, I have tremendous nachas and joy for my family, and I came here to thank you for saving my life that night by giving me that advice. That is what it means, comfort. Comfort means that yes, there are struggles, there are hardships, but we have the power within to overcome them. And so whether or not the hurricane comes to Florida, let us remember that the words of Isaiah, not the hurricane Isaias, but the prophet Isaiah's words of comfort tell us that whatever storms may come our way, God gives us the spiritual power, if we care about each other and we take responsibility for one another, that we could overcome all of those storms, and we can find the inner strength to find comfort and peace and tranquility in our lives and in the lives of our loved ones, our community, and our society. As we go through these difficult times, let us go forward with the light and the confidence and the optimism, knowing that happy days are upon us, the day of joy, of marriage, of love, of building our families and future Jewish families, and the day of breaking the axe, that any power that can destroy us, God forbid, or even harm us, will be broken and destroyed. And like a palm tree, as King David says, Tzaddik tamar yifrach, we will flourish through righteousness like the palm tree, and we will grow ever taller, stronger, and brighter, providing more and more strength and shade and support and love for one another. Shabbat Shalom u'Mevorach, a blessed and a comforting Shabbos for all of us.